Over 40% of adults past 60 who suffer from sudden, explosive diarrhea after meals are completely misdiagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome or food allergies. The real culprit is a toxic chemical spill happening deep inside your digestive tract that burns your colon lining every single time you eat fat. Today, we will uncover the 3 hidden triggers causing this bile acid overflow and the exact daily protocol that stops the urgency within 48 hours. Take 62-year-old Robert, who spent $1,200 on specialized elimination diets, only to watch his urgent bathroom dashes get progressively worse with every passing week. If you want the real, unfiltered science behind gut longevity without the expensive supplement hype, subscribe to the channel and let's get into it. To understand Robert's digestive nightmare, we first have to look inside the liver, where your body manufactures roughly 1 quart of golden digestive fluid daily. Think of bile acids as heavy-duty dish detergent designed to emulsify stubborn dietary fats so your small intestine can absorb critical fat-soluble vitamins safely. Under healthy conditions, 95% of this potent biological detergent gets neatly reabsorbed in the very last 17 inches of your small intestine called the terminal ileum. However, after your 60th birthday, the specialized transporters inside that terminal ileum often begin failing, leaving free bile acids spilling over into your large intestine. Once unabsorbed bile floods into your colon, it acts like an aggressive chemical laxative, forcing your cells to pump massive amounts of water into your stool. Physicians call this bile acid malabsorption, and studies show it accounts for nearly 1 in 3 cases of chronic, unexplained diarrhea in older adults today. Because Robert assumed his symptoms stemmed from food sensitivities, he eliminated healthy avocados and olive oil, completely missing the underlying chemical imbalance happening below his stomach. Even when you starve your body of dietary fat, your liver keeps synthesizing bile because of a broken communication loop controlled by a hormone called FGF19. Normally, when your terminal ileum absorbs bile, it releases FGF19 into your bloodstream as a cellular stop sign to tell the liver production factory to halt. When reabsorption fails, that critical FGF19 stop signal never reaches the brain and liver, causing your system to continually pump out burning detergents right into your bowel. The first major physiological trigger driving this overproduction past 60 is the long-term consequence of having your gallbladder removed earlier in adulthood. Without a gallbladder to serve as a storage tank, raw bile drips continuously down into your intestines like a leaky faucet 24 hours a day. Robert had a cholecystectomy 15 years ago, yet his primary physician never warned him that aging would severely multiply his gut's vulnerability to that constant bile drip. The second age-related trigger involves your gut microbiome, specifically an overgrowth of bacteria that convert harmless primary bile into highly irritating secondary bile acids. These microbial colonizers strip taurine and glycine from bile salts, producing deoxycholic acid, a compound known to stimulate violent muscular contractions in your colon walls. This exact bacterial transformation explains why so many seniors experience their most urgent, uncontrollable bowel movements first thing in the morning right after waking up. The third hidden driver is subtle microscopic inflammation of the ileum, caused by decades of NSAID painkiller use and reduced mesenteric blood flow after 60. Over-the-counter ibuprofen and aspirin slowly erode the delicate mucosal villi housing your ASBT bile transporters, effectively disabling your gut's primary recycling machinery over time. When Robert visited his gastroenterologist, standard colonoscopies and blood panels returned entirely normal because routine screening completely misses free bile acids in the stool. While European clinics utilize a definitive Say-HTAT nuclear scan to measure bile retention, this crucial 48-hour imaging test is unavailable here in the United States. Instead, top American gut specialists rely on a targeted therapeutic trial using specialized compounds that physically trap rogue bile molecules inside the intestinal lumen. Imagine dropping millions of microscopic magnetic sponges into your lower intestine to grab irritating bile salts before they can ever make contact with your colon walls. While prescription resins like cholestyramine can bind these excess acids rapidly, many patients like Robert struggle with severe bloating and poor absorption of essential vitamins. This forced Robert to explore specific prebiotic fibers and dietary fats that naturally modulate the FXR receptor pathway without stripping his system of critical micronutrients. What we discovered about pairing soluble calcium with targeted soluble glucans completely changed his stool consistency in under 3 days, but timing is everything. To understand this sudden urgency, we must examine your small intestine's finish line, the terminal ileum, where 95% of daily bile must be recaptured. Here, specialized cellular gatekeepers called ASBT protein pumps line the final 12 inches of your ileum, working relentlessly to grab every passing bile molecule. Think of these microscopic ASBT pumps as industrial magnetic vacuums, pulling cholic acid out of digested food before it ever reaches your large intestine. After your 60th birthday, localized cellular oxidation and microvascular decline can cause the density of these vital ASBT pumps to drop by 40%. When those pumps degrade, nearly 20% of your daily 4-gram bile acid output slips past the recycling barrier into forbidden intestinal territory. Inside your large intestine, this unabsorbed alkaline detergent hits delicate tissue biologically engineered only to absorb pure water, immediately disrupting cellular lipid membranes. The exact moment free bile acids contact colonic mucosal cells, they trigger a violent irritant reaction that mimics a severe chemical burn on tender tissue. In rapid defense against this caustic injury, your mucosal lining instantly opens chloride channels, pumping quarts of emergency fluid directly into the lumen to dilute the toxin. Simultaneously, irritated enteric nerves fire panic signals, accelerating normal 20-minute colonic peristaltic waves into a violent 3-minute evacuation cascade. Combined together, massive fluid secretion plus hyperactive contractions form the precise physiological mechanism driving your sudden 15-minute post-meal emergency. You might wonder why this urgency strikes even on a bland diet, when you have cut out dairy, gluten, and all common inflammatory triggers. Because whenever you swallow food, gastric distension triggers the release of cholecystectomy, commanding your gallbladder or liver to dump stored bile instantly into your gut. If you underwent a cholecystectomy in your 50s or 60s, you face an even more severe mechanical handicap, known as continuous biliary dripping. Without a holding tank to regulate flow, your liver slowly drips up to 15 ounces of unbuffered cholic acid directly into your duodenum every single day. Such relentless, unbuffered leakage easily overwhelms your aging ileal ASBT pumps, ensuring a continuous river of caustic bile pours into your lower colon overnight. Overnight pooling inside your lower digestive tract explains why millions of seniors wake up at 6 in the morning facing an immediate, frantic bathroom emergency. Yet the destruction unfolding inside your colon goes far deeper than morning cramps, because lost bile triggers a disastrous endocrine feedback malfunction throughout your body. Normally, recaptured bile returning via the portal vein binds to a specialized nuclear sensor called FXR, which immediately stimulates production of the hormone FGF19. Consider FGF19 your body's biochemical emergency brake, traveling directly through your bloodstream to tell liver cells to halt all synthesis of brand new bile acids. Once your aging ileum fails to reabsorb bile efficiently, circulating FGF19 blood levels plummet by nearly 60% within just 2 weeks of cellular decline. Blinded by that severe drop in FGF19, your liver erroneously assumes your system is starving for bile and immediately activates the CYP7A1 enzyme. Driven by CYP7A1 activation, your liver converts raw cholesterol into massive batches of fresh bile acids, increasing daily synthesis by 300%. Now you are trapped in a devastating biological loop. Overflowing bile irritates your colon, while your blinded liver works overtime pumping out more caustic fluid. Over time, chronic chemical irritation strips away your colon's protective mucus barrier, leaving delicate epithelial tissue vulnerable to opportunistic bacteria and low-grade mucosal inflammation. Standard colonoscopies completely miss this microscopic burn because conventional white light cameras only detect macroscopic polyps, tumors, or visible ulcerations on the intestinal wall. Because the tissue looks outwardly normal, doctors frequently misdiagnose seniors with irritable bowel syndrome and prescribe generic fiber supplements that actually trap harsh bile salts. Adding bulky psyllium husks to an already bile-flooded, inflamed colon acts like rubbing sandpaper over a chemical burn, dramatically intensifying cramping, gas, and pain. Furthermore, standard over-the-counter anti-diarrheal pills only slow down intestinal muscular contractions without stopping the caustic chemical water pouring from your mucosal lining. To break this vicious 60-plus urgency cycle, you must either chemically bind the unabsorbed bile detergent or restore your liver's missing FGF19 brake signal. Understanding how this ileal receptor breakdown happens reveals why specific natural binders can safely sponge up excess bile and stop the diarrhea within 48 hours. Why do these transport turnstiles fail after 60? Cellular aging directly reduces the density of specialized bile acid transporters across the lining of your terminal ileum. These ASBT proteins act like microscopic vacuum cleaners on your intestinal cells, normally catching 95% of circulating bile salts before they can escape. As stem cell turnover slows with advancing age, these vital transporter proteins degrade significantly faster than your aging digestive tract can manufacture functional replacements. When those unabsorbed bile salts slip past your terminal ileum, they plunge straight down into your large colon, where they become extremely destructive chemicals. Once inside the large intestine, these escaped dihydroxy bile acids stop digesting dietary fat and immediately start acting like a potent, fast-acting chemical laxative. Within seconds of direct contact, these caustic bile salts irritate your colonic epithelial cells and trigger an explosive, abnormal surge in intracellular cyclic AMP. That sudden spike in cyclic AMP forces cellular chloride channels wide open, pumping massive amounts of electrolyte-rich fluid directly out into your intestinal lumen. Water instantly rushes across the mucosal membrane via osmosis to follow those chloride ions, transforming a normal solid stool into an uncontrollable liquid avalanche. Simultaneously, these irritating bile acids bind to specialized TGR5 receptors located on the sensitive enteric nerve fibers embedded deep within your colonic smooth muscle. This rapid receptor activation triggers violent peristaltic contractions, which explains why you experience sharp, cramping abdominal spasms just 15 minutes after finishing dinner. Why does this destructive process strike so suddenly after 60? The underlying mechanism involves a critical age-related breakdown in your liver feedback loop. When a healthy terminal ileum absorbs bile successfully, it secretes a vital signaling hormone called fibroblast growth factor 19 to regulate your hepatic production. That FGF19 messenger travels through the portal vein straight to your hepatocytes, instructing your liver to immediately shut down synthesis of new bile acids. However, clinical research confirms that adults over 60 frequently exhibit severely impaired FGF19 secretion, leaving your liver completely blind to downstream intestinal bile levels. Without that inhibitory brake pedal, your hepatic CYP7A1 enzyme stays locked in overdrive, continuously synthesizing and dumping toxic excess bile into your digestive tract. You end up suffering a physiological double hit. Your aging liver overproduces primary bile acids, while your compromised ileal transporters fail to reabsorb the surge. Another major hidden trigger after 60 is widespread gastric hypochlorhydria, which is the progressive, age-related decline of hydrochloric acid production inside your aging stomach. Over 30% of seniors suffer from low gastric acid, often accelerated by years of taking over-the-counter heartburn medications and proton pump inhibitors. When your stomach acid drops below normal levels, oral bacteria survive passage through the stomach and colonize your upper small intestine in massive numbers. Those misplaced intestinal bacteria prematurely deconjugate your bile salts right in the jejunum, far above the specialized transport turnstiles waiting down in your ileum. These deconjugated bile acids become structurally damaged molecules that cannot attach to your ileal ASBT transporters no matter how well your cells are functioning. Instead of being recycled normally, these damage-free bile acids race straight into your colon, provoking urgent watery diarrhea shortly after eating your breakfast. We also have to examine past surgeries, because nearly 40% of adults over 60 have undergone gallbladder removal earlier in their lives. Without a gallbladder storage reservoir to time release with meals, your liver drips unbuffered bile directly into your small intestine all day and night. By age 60, decades of this continuous bile leakage completely saturate and overwhelm any remaining ASBT transport capacity along the lining of your terminal ileum. Furthermore, subtle vascular narrowing in older age decreases mesenteric blood flow, depriving your ileal transporters of the cellular ATP energy required for active absorption. That cellular energy deficit explains why sudden diarrhea often strikes with vengeance right after eating a heavy, high-fat restaurant meal with your family or friends. When heavy dietary fat hits your duodenum, your liver secretes a massive surge of bile acids that instantly exceeds your compromised ileal reabsorption threshold. This is precisely why millions of seniors eliminate gluten, dairy, and vegetables for years without relief, blaming harmless foods for an underlying bile spill. Now that you understand the true physiological culprit behind post-meal urgency, we can examine the specific clinical therapies designed to intercept toxic bile acid malabsorption. Why US doctors routinely misdiagnose bile acid malabsorption as irritable bowel syndrome, leaving over 30% of older patients suffering without proper answers. In Europe, doctors use a simple nuclear medicine scan called CHAT-KERS-PUD, but the FDA never approved that diagnostic tool here in the United States. Without CHAT, American physicians rely on colonoscopies that look completely normal because excess bile acids cause microscopic chemical irritation rather than visible structural damage. You can ask your doctor for a fasting serum C4 blood test, which measures 7-alpha-hydroxy-4-cholestin 3,1, the exact biomarker of rapid bile acid synthesis. If your serum C4 level comes back above 48 nanograms per milliliter, your liver is churning out massive amounts of bile that your ileum cannot absorb. To stop this overproduction, your terminal ileum normally releases a crucial signaling hormone called fibroblast growth factor 19 straight into your portal vein. Think of FGF19 as the emergency brake. When bile arrives at the end of your small intestine, this hormone tells your liver to halt manufacturing immediately. After age 60, chronic low-grade intestinal inflammation blunts your ileum's sensitivity, causing a 50% drop in circulating FGF19 levels after your meals. Because the liver never receives that chemical stop signal, its cholesterol 7-alpha-hydroxylase enzyme stays locked in overdrive throughout the entire day and night. This continuous biliary flooding means that even drinking a simple 8-ounce glass of morning water can trigger violent colon spasms within 20 minutes. But volume alone is not the only culprit. As we age, shifts in our gut microbiome transform healthy primary bile into toxic chemical compounds. Overgrown colonic bacteria release an enzyme called bile salt hydrolase, stripping away beneficial amino acids like glycine and taurine from your bile salts. Once stripped, normal cholic acid mutates into deoxycholic acid, a caustic secondary bile acid that acts like liquid soap on your intestinal lining. This detergent effect strips away the protective mucosal gel layer, leaving colonic epithelial cells raw and desperate to flush the irritant out quickly. That urgent rush to the bathroom is actually your immune system dumping chloride ions and water to dilute the chemical burning on your colon wall. This explains why cutting out gluten, dairy, and FODMAPs fails to stop the urgency. Those foods never cause the underlying secretory diarrhea in the first place. Instead, specific dietary fats act as the trigger, because consuming just 10 grams of triglycerides signals your gallbladder to contract and dump stored bile instantly. Long-chain fatty acids from oils and meats stimulate the release of cholecystectomy, a gut hormone that squeezes bile into your duodenum like a syringe. Even a single tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil poured over healthy greens can provoke an explosive bowel movement 45 minutes later. Black coffee is another sneaky trigger because chlorogenic acid directly stimulates gallbladder contractions and speeds up colonic transit time independently of caffeine content. If you had your gallbladder removed during your 50s, you lost your precision storage reservoir, leaving bile dripping continuously into your digestive tract 24 hours a day. Without a gallbladder to time the release with meals, unbuffered bile acids trickle directly into the empty colon while you are sleeping soundly at night. That continuous nighttime leakage explains why nearly 40% of seniors with bile acid malabsorption wake up at 5 in the morning with urgent cramps. Yet paradoxically, eating a zero-fat diet to avoid these attacks only worsens long-term metabolism by causing thick, stagnant bile sludge to accumulate inside biliary ducts. When you finally eat a normal meal after days of restriction, that concentrated toxic sludge ejects all at once, creating a catastrophic digestive explosion. To break this vicious cycle without starving your body of healthy fats, we must use specific mechanical binders that trap unabsorbed bile acids inside the intestinal lumen. Most patients mistakenly load up on rough insoluble fibers like wheat bran, which only scratch the irritated colon wall and accelerate intestinal transit even faster. You must instead use highly viscous soluble fibers, specifically psyllium husk, because its unique physical structure creates a thick, sticky gel matrix inside the gut. Just 5 grams of psyllium taken with water 15 minutes before eating acts like a molecular sponge, capturing up to 80% of loose bile acids. By trapping the caustic bile molecules inside that soothing gel, psyllium prevents them from touching your colon wall, instantly halting the secretory chloride dump. Let's move beyond diagnosis into precise physiological solutions, starting with how to intercept toxic bile before it ever reaches your sensitive lower colon. Prescription bile acid sequestrants like cholestyramine act like chemical magnets. These positively charged resins literally trap negatively charged bile molecules inside your small intestine. Once trapped, those irritating bile acids form a large, insoluble matrix your body safely eliminates without triggering explosive fluid rushes down below. However, pharmaceutical resins have a serious drawback. They aggressively bind essential vitamins A, D, E, and K directly inside your intestinal tract. If you take daily blood pressure or thyroid pills within 4 hours of these binders, your medication gets absorbed like water into dry sawdust. That is why controlling dietary fat volume is your smarter first-line lever before relying strictly on pharmaceutical binders every single day. Think of dietary fat as the volume knob for gallbladder contractions. Eating 50 grams of fat instantly commands a massive caustic bile surge. By capping mealtime fat at 15 grams, you prevent overwhelming and age-damaged ileum while still triggering enough bile to digest essential nutrients properly. Never drop your dietary fat to zero, however. Complete fat restriction causes severe bile stasis in your liver, eventually forming sludge and gallstones. Instead, swap long-chain cooking oils for medium-chain triglycerides. Pure MCT oil completely bypasses normal bile emulsification during upper digestive processing. MCT molecules absorb directly through the portal vein into your liver, delivering clean cellular energy without forcing a heavy biliary dump. Now let's examine specific soluble fibers that act as gentle, natural sponges for excess bile without causing explosive gas or cramping. Psyllium husk and calcium polycarbophyl form a thick, viscous gel inside your duodenum, physically trapping loose bile molecules safely within your gut lumen. You must take psyllium exactly 30 minutes after finishing a meal. That timing perfectly catches the bile surge draining out of your gallbladder. Never consume abrasive insoluble roughage like wheat bran during active flare-ups. Those sharp fiber stalks mechanically scratch an already inflamed hypersensitive colonic lining. Next, we must investigate your terminal ileum, the crucial 5-foot segment of small intestine designed to recycle 95% of your bile. After age 60, chronic intestinal inflammation dramatically reduces your active ileal transporters, leaving hundreds of uncaptured bile molecules spilling directly into your colon. To reactivate those dormant transporters, you need to stimulate the farnesoid X receptor, the master nuclear switch controlling bile reabsorption and synthesis. Natural FXR activation requires lowering bacterial endotoxins from opportunistic microbes like Klebsiella that routinely migrate upward from your large intestine as you age. This uncovers the hidden role of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. These rogue bacteria chemically alter your bile acids right inside the upper gut. When bacteria strip the protective taurine or glycine amino acid off a bile salt, that deconjugated molecule transforms into a caustic cellular poison. Deconjugated bile acids rapidly burn delicate enterocytes, pulling gallons of water into the intestinal cavity and forcing violent diarrhea within 20 minutes. To neutralize bacterial deconjugation, introduce Saccharomyces boulardii. This resilient probiotic yeast survives stomach acid and actively defends against toxic bile irritation. Saccharomyces boulardii secretes specialized protective proteins that seal damaged tight junctions while binding enterotoxins before they trigger intestinal contractions. We must also fix your dinner schedule, because your liver circadian clock runs a strict nighttime schedule of bile production while you sleep. Eating a heavy, greasy meal at 8 p.m. forces your liver to pump bile continuously into an inactive, resting digestive tract overnight. By 6 a.m., your colon is overflowing with pooled, caustic nighttime bile, guaranteeing an explosive emergency run out of bed right upon waking. Shifting your final meal 4 hours before bedtime and keeping fat under 15 grams completely halts that destructive overnight bile pooling. Another targeted botanical tool is standardized artichoke leaf extract. It promotes smooth, consistent bile secretion rather than sudden, irritating biliary surges after meals. To maximize artichoke extract, pair it with calcium citrate. Ionized calcium forms a safe soap with unabsorbed bile acids right inside your colon. To confirm this condition without guessing, ask your doctor for a serum C4 blood test. This simple lab measures exactly how fast your liver produces toxic new bile acids. When C4 levels come back high, it proves your terminal ileum is failing to recycle bile. Your liver senses a false shortage and floods your colon continuously. If your insurance denies that lab, many doctors use an empirical trial of prescription sequestrants instead. Stopping your urgent diarrhea within 2 days confirms the bile problem immediately. For long-term repair, your ileum needs targeted nutritional support to restore normal hormone signaling. Pure soluble fiber like Acacia senegal acts as a gentle sponge for excess bile. Unlike harsh wheat bran that scrapes sensitive colon walls, acacia fiber dissolves completely in water. It binds irritating free bile acids without causing bloating or explosive bathroom rushes. You must also space out your healthy fats across smaller meals throughout the day. Dumping 60 grams of fat into one dinner triggers an overwhelming bile rush downstream. Because chronic bile diarrhea drains vital potassium and sodium, drink an electrolyte mix every morning. Plain water alone cannot restore the cellular hydration lost during urgent bathroom runs. Rebuilding your bifidobacteria strains is critical for healthy bile metabolism after age 60. These beneficial microbes chemically transform harsh primary bile acids into soothing secondary compounds. Finally, evaluate your daily medications with your doctor, especially chronic antacids. Suppressing stomach acid permanently disrupts the hormonal signals that coordinate smooth bile release and digestion. When 60-year-old Robert followed this exact bile protocol, his 10-year struggle with daily bathroom emergencies stopped in 7 days. He finally traveled without anxiety. You never have to accept sudden diarrhea as a normal part of aging. Your colon is healthy and intact. You simply need to regulate your bile recycling loop. Now you know that unabsorbed bile acids, not dietary flaws, cause urgent diarrhea after 60. Hit the like button if this biological mechanism finally solved your digestive mystery. Comment below. How long did you eliminate foods before learning about bile? Subscribe for real science. And click next to see how gallbladder sludge blocks your daily metabolism.